Robert William Willie Pickton, born the 24th of October 1949, is a Canadian serial killer who was convicted in 2007 of the second-degree murders of 6 women. Arrested in 2002, he was the subject of a lengthy investigation that yielded evidence of numerous other murders. Pickton was charged with the deaths of an additional 20 women, many of them from Vancouver's downtown east side, but these charges were stayed by the Crown in 2010. Pickton was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole for 25 years, the longest sentence for murder under Canadian law at the time he was sentenced. During the trial's first day of jury evidence, the Crown stated that Pickton had confessed to 49 murders to an undercover agent from the Office of Inspector General, who was posing as a cellmate. The Crown reported that Pickton told the officer that he wanted to kill another woman to make it an even 50, and that he was caught because he was sloppy. Background: Robert William Pickton and his brother David owned a farm in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, 27 kilometers, 17 miles east of Vancouver. Worker Bill Hiscox called the farm a creepy-looking place and described Pickton as a pretty quiet guy whose sometimes bizarre behavior, despite no evidence of substance abuse, would draw attention. The Pickton brothers began to neglect the site's farming operations. They registered a non-profit charity, the Piggy Palace Good Times Society, with the Canadian government in 1996, claiming to organize, coordinate, manage and operate special events, functions, dances, shows and exhibitions on behalf of service organizations, sports organizations and other worthy groups. Its events included raves and wild parties featuring Vancouver sex workers and gatherings in a converted slaughterhouse on the farm. These events attracted as many as 2,000 people. Members of the Hells Angels were known to frequent the farm. On March 23, 1997, Pickton was charged with the attempted murder of sex worker Wendy Lynn Eistetter, whom he had stabbed several times during an altercation at the farm. Eistetter had informed police that Pickton had handcuffed her, but that she had escaped after suffering several lacerations. She told them she had disarmed him and stabbed him with his weapon. Pickton sought treatment at Eagle Ridge Hospital, while Eistetter recovered at the nearest emergency room. He was released on $2,000 bond. The charge was dismissed in January 1998. Months later, the Picktons were sued by Port Coquitlam officials for violating zoning ordinances, neglecting the agriculture for which it had been zoned, and having altered the large farm building on the land for the purpose of holding dances, concerts and other recreations. The Picktons ignored the legal pressure and held a 1998 New Year's party, after which they were faced with an injunction banning future parties. The police were authorized to arrest and remove any person attending future events at the farm. The society's non-profit status was removed the following year, for inability to procure financial statements. It was subsequently disbanded. Murders over the course of 3 years. Hiscox noticed that women who visited the farm eventually went missing. On February 6, 2002, police executed a search warrant for illegal firearms at the property. Robert and David Pickton were arrested and police obtained a second warrant using what they had seen on the property to search the farm as part of the BC Missing Women investigation. Personal items belonging to missing women were found at the farm, which was sealed off by members of the joint RCMP Vancouver Police Department task force. The following day, Pickton was charged with weapons offenses. Both of the Picktons were later released. However, Robert Pickton was kept under police surveillance. On February 22, Robert Pickton was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Serena Botsway and Mona Wilson. On April 2, 3 more charges were added for the murders of Jacqueline McDonnell, Diane Rock, and Heather Bottomley. A 6th charge for the murder of Andrea Josberry was laid on April 9, followed shortly by a 7th for Brenda Wolfe. On September 20, 4 more charges were added for the slayings of Georgina Papin, Patricia Johnson, Helen Hallmark, and Jennifer Firminger. 4 more charges for the murders of Heather Chinnock, Tom Uhalik, Sherry Irving, and Inga Hall were laid on October 3, bringing the total to 15. This was the largest investigation of any serial killer in Canadian history. On May 26, 2005, 12 more charges were laid against Pickton for the killings of Cara Ellis, Andrea Berhaven, Deborah Lynn Jones, Marnie Frey, Tiffany Drew, Carrie Koski, Sarah Tavares, Cynthia Felix, Angela Jardine, Wendy Crawford, Diana Melnick, and Jane Doe, bringing the total number of first-degree murder charges to 27. Excavations continued at the farm through November 2003. The cost of the investigation is estimated to have been $70 million by the end of 2003, according to the provincial government. As of 2015, the property is fenced off, under lien by the Crown and right of British Columbia. In the meantime, all the buildings on the property, except a small barn, had been demolished. Forensic analysis proved difficult because the bodies may have been left to decompose, or be eaten by insects and pigs on the farm. During the early days of the excavations, forensic anthropologists brought in heavy equipment, including 2 50-foot, 15-meter flat conveyor belts and soil sifters to find traces of human remains. On March 10, 2004, the government revealed that Pickton may have ground up human flesh and mixed it with pork that he sold to the public. The province's health authority later issued a warning. Another claim was made that he fed the bodies directly to his pigs. Preliminary inquiry was held in 2003, the testimony from which was covered by a publication ban until 2010. At the inquiry, the fact was revealed that Pickton had been charged with attempted murder in connection with the stabbing of sex worker Wendy Lynn Eistetter in 1997. Eistetter testified at the inquiry that after Pickton had driven her to the Port Coquitlam farm and had sex with her, he slapped a handcuff on her left hand and stabbed her in the abdomen. She stabbed Pickton in self-defense. Later, both she and Pickton were treated at the same hospital, where staff used a key they found in Pickton's pocket to remove the handcuffs from the woman's wrist. The attempted murder charge against Pickton was stayed on January 27, 1998, because the woman had drug addiction issues and prosecutors believed her too unstable for her testimony to help secure a conviction. The clothes and rubber boots Pickton had been wearing that evening were seized by police and left in an RCMP storage locker for more than 7 years. Not until 2004 did lab testing show that the DNA of 2 missing women was on the items seized from Pickton in 1997.in 1998, according to Vancouver Police Detective Constable Lorimer Shenher. Shenher learned of a call made to a police tip phone line stating that Pickton should be investigated in the case of the women's disappearances. According to Shenher's account, described at length in his 2015 book about the case, he struggled to attract sufficient police resources and attention to the case until the 2002 search of Pickton's farm by the RCMP.in 1999. Canadian police had received a tip that Pickton had a freezer filled with human flesh on his farm. Although they interviewed Pickton, who denied killing the missing women, and obtained his consent to search his farm, the police never conducted one. Pickton's trial began on January 30, 2006 in New Westminster. Pickton pleaded not guilty to 27 charges of first-degree murder in the Supreme Court of British Columbia. The voir dire phase of the trial took most of the year to determine what evidence might be admitted before the jury. Reporters were not allowed to disclose any of the material presented in the arguments. On March 2, one of the 27 counts was rejected by Justice James Williams for lack of evidence. On August 9, Justice Williams severed the charges, splitting them into one group of 6 counts and another group of 20 counts. The trial proceeded on the group of 6 counts. The remaining 20 counts could have been heard in a separate trial, but ultimately were stayed on August 4, 2010. Because of the publication ban, full details of the decision are not publicly available. but the judge has explained that trying all 26 charges at once would put an unreasonable burden on the jury, as the trial could last up to 2 years. It also would have had an increased chance for a mistrial. The judge added that the 6 counts he chose had materially different evidence from the other 20. Office of Inspector General Senior Investigator R.J. McDougald was case agent for the investigation. The date for the jury trial of the first 6 counts was initially set to start January 8, 2007, but was later postponed to January 22. On that date, Pickton faced first-degree murder charges in the deaths of Frey, Abotsway, Pickton, Joesbury, Wolfe and Wilson. The media ban was lifted, and for the first time Canadians heard the details of what was found during the long investigation: skulls cut in half with hands and feet stuffed inside, the remains of one victim found stuffed in a garbage bag, and her blood-stained clothing found in Pickton's trailer, part of another victim's jawbone and teeth found beside Pickton's slaughterhouse, and a .22 caliber revolver with an attached dildo containing both his and the victim's DNA. In a videotaped recording played for the jury, Pickton claimed to have attached the dildo to his weapon as a makeshift silencer. As of February 20, 2007, the following information has been presented to the court. During Pickton's trial, lab staff testified that about 80 unidentified DNA profiles, roughly half male and half female, have been detected on evidence. The items police found inside Pickton's trailer: a loaded .22 revolver with a dildo over the barrel and 1 round fired, boxes of .357 Magnum handgun ammunition, night vision goggles, 2 pairs of full fur-lined handcuffs, a syringe with 3 milliliters of blue liquid inside, and Spanish fly aphrodisiac. A videotape of Pickton's friend Scott Chubb saying Pickton had told him a good way to kill a female heroin addict was to inject her with windshield washer fluid. A second tape was played for Pickton, in which an associate named Andrew Bellwood said Pickton mentioned killing sex workers by handcuffing and strangling them, then bleeding and gutting them before feeding them to pigs. Photos of the contents of a garbage can found in Pickton's slaughterhouse, which held some remains of Mona Wilson. In October 2007, a juror was accused of having made up her mind already that Pickton was innocent. The trial judge questioned the juror, saying, "It's reported to me you said from what you had seen you were certain Mr. Pickton was innocent. There was no way he could have done this. That the court system had arrested the wrong guy." The juror denied this completely. Justice Williams ruled that she could remain on the jury since it had not been proven she made the statements. Justice James Williams suspended jury deliberations on December 6, 2007, after he discovered an error in his charge to the jury. Earlier in the day, the jury had submitted a written question to Justice James requesting clarification of his charge, asking, "Are we able to say yes, i.e., find Pickton guilty if we infer the accused acted indirectly?" On December 9, 2007, the jury returned a verdict that Pickton is not guilty on 6 counts of first-degree murder, but is guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder. A second-degree murder conviction carries a punishment of a life sentence, with no possibility of parole for a period between 10 and 25 years, to be set by the trial judge. On December 11, 2007, after reading 18 victim impact statements, British Columbia Supreme Court Judge Justice James Williams sentenced Pickton to life with no possibility of parole for 25 years, the maximum punishment for second-degree murder, and equal to the sentence which would have been imposed for a first-degree murder conviction. Mr. Pickton's conduct was murderous and repeatedly so. "I cannot know the details, but I know this. What happened to them was senseless and despicable," said Justice Williams in passing the sentence. British Columbia Court of Appeal. The BC Court of Appeal rendered judgment in June 2009 on 2 appeals, one brought by the Crown prosecution and the other brought by the defense. Crown appeal. On January 7, 2008, the Attorney General filed an appeal in the British Columbia Court of Appeal against Pickton's acquittals on the first-degree murder charges. The grounds of appeal relate to a number of evidentiary rulings made by the trial judge, certain aspects of the trial judge's jury instructions, and the ruling to sever the 6 charges Pickton was tried on from the remaining 20. Some relatives of the victims in the case were taken aback by the announcement of a Crown appeal, especially because Attorney General Wally Oppel had said a few days earlier that the prosecution would likely not appeal. Although Pickton had been acquitted on the first-degree murder charges, he was convicted of second-degree murder and received the same sentence as he would have on first-degree murder convictions. The relatives of the victims expressed concern that the convictions would be jeopardized if the Crown argued that the trial judge had made errors. Opposition critic Leonard Krog criticized the Attorney General for not having briefed the victims' families in advance. Oppel apologized to the victims' families for not informing them of the appeal before it was announced to the general public. Oppel also said that the appeal was filed largely for strategic reasons, in anticipation of an appeal by the defense. The prosecution's rationale was that if Pickton appeals his convictions, and if that appeal is allowed, resulting in a new trial, the prosecution will want to hold that new trial on the original 26 charges of first-degree murder. But the Crown would be precluded from doing so unless it had successfully appealed the original acquittals on the first-degree murder charges, and the severance of the 26 counts into one group of 6 and one group of 20. Under the applicable rules of court, the time period for the Crown to appeal expired 30 days after December 9, when the verdicts were rendered, while the time period for the defense to appeal expired 30 days after December 11, when Pickton was sentenced. That is why the Crown announced its appeal first, even though the Crown appeal is intended to be conditional on an appeal by the defense. If the defense had not filed an appeal, then the Crown could have withdrawn its appeal. Defense appeal. On January 9, 2008, lawyers for Pickton filed a notice of appeal in the British Columbia Court of Appeal, seeking a new trial on 6 counts of second-degree murder. The lawyer representing Pickton on the appeal was Gil McKinnon, who had been a Crown prosecutor in the 1970s. The notice of appeal enumerated various areas in which the defense alleged that the trial judge erred: the main charge to the jury, the response to the jurors' questions, amending the jury charge, similar fact evidence, and Pickton's statements to the police. Decisions of the Court of Appeal. The British Columbia Court of Appeal issued its decisions on June 25, 2009, but some parts of the decisions were not publicly released because of publication bans still in effect. The Court of Appeal dismissed the defense appeal by a 2-1 majority. Due to a dissent on a point of law, Pickton was entitled to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada, without first seeking leave to appeal. His notice of appeal was filed in the Supreme Court of Canada on August 24, 2009. The Court of Appeal allowed the Crown appeal, finding that the trial judge erred in excluding some evidence and in severing the 26 counts into one group of 20 counts and one group of 6. The order resulting from this finding was stayed, so that the conviction on the 6 counts of second-degree murder would not be set aside. Supreme Court of Canada. On June 26, 2009, Pickton's lawyers confirmed that they would exercise his right to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. The appeal was based on the dissent in the British Columbia Court of Appeal. While Pickton had an automatic right to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada based on the legal issues on which Justice Donald had dissented, Pickton's lawyers applied to the Supreme Court of Canada for leave to appeal on other issues as well. On November 26, 2009, the Supreme Court of Canada granted this application for leave to appeal. The effect of this was to broaden the scope of Pickton's appeal, allowing him to raise arguments that had been rejected unanimously in the BC Court of Appeal, not just arguments that had been rejected by the 2-1 majority. On July 30, 2010, the Supreme Court of Canada rendered its decision dismissing Pickton's appeal and affirming his convictions. The argument that Pickton should be granted a new trial was unanimously rejected by the justices of the Supreme Court of Canada. Although unanimous in its result, the Supreme Court split 6-3 in its legal analysis of the case. The issue was whether the trial judge made a legal error in his instructions to the jury, and in particular in his re-instruction responding to the jury's question about Pickton's liability if he was not the only person involved. Writing for the majority, Madam Justice Charan found that the trial judge's response to the question posed by the jury did not adversely impact on the fairness of the trial. She further found that the trial judge's overall instructions with respect to other suspects compendiously captured the alternative routes to liability that were realistically an issue in this trial. The jury was also correctly instructed that it could convict Mr. Pickton if the Crown proved this level of participation coupled with the requisite intent. Mr. Justice LaBelle, writing for the minority, found that the jury was not properly informed of the legal principles which would have allowed them as triers of fact to consider evidence of Mr. Pickton's aid and encouragement to an unknown shooter as an alternative means of imposing liability for the murders. However, LaBelle J. would have applied the so-called curative proviso so as not to overturn Pickton's convictions. Reaction and aftermath to the court proceedings. Discontinuance of prosecution of other counts against Pickton. BC Crown spokesman Neil Mackenzie announced that the prosecution of Pickton on the 20 other murder charges would likely be discontinued. In reaching this position, he said, the branch has taken into account the fact that any additional convictions could not result in any increase to the sentence that Mr. Pickton has already received. Families of the victims had varied reactions to this announcement. Some were disappointed that Pickton would never be convicted of the 20 other murders, while others were relieved that the gruesome details of the murders would not be aired in court. Vancouver Police Department Management Review of Investigation. In 2010, the Vancouver Police Department issued a statement that an exhaustive management review of the missing women investigation had been conducted, and the VPD would make the review available to the public once the criminal matters are concluded and the publication bans are removed. In addition, the VPD disclosed that for several years it has communicated privately to the provincial government that it believed a public inquiry would be necessary for an impartial examination of why it took so long for Robert Pickton to be arrested. In August of that year, the VPD released the Missing Women Investigation Review. VPD apology. At a press conference, Deputy Chief Constable Doug Leppard of the VPD apologized to the victims' families, saying, "I wish from the bottom of my heart that we would have caught him sooner. I wish that, the several agencies involved, that we could have done better in so many ways. I wish that all the mistakes that were made, we could undo. And I wish that more lives would have been saved." So on my behalf and behalf of the Vancouver Police Department and all the men and women that worked on this investigation, I would say to the families how sorry we all are for your losses and because we did not catch this monster sooner. Missing Women Commission of Inquiry. After Robert Pickton lost his final appeal at the Supreme Court of Canada, the Missing Women Commission of Inquiry chaired by Wally Oppel was called to examine the role of the Vancouver Police and the RCMP in the disappearances and murders of women in the downtown east side. Families of the missing and murdered women have been calling for public hearings since before Pickton was arrested and eventually convicted of 6 murders. The Commission's final report submission to the Attorney General was dated November 19, 2012 and was released to the public on December 17. During the inquiry, lawyers for some of the victims' families sought to have an unpublished 289-page manuscript authored by former police investigator Laurie Shanher entered as evidence and made entirely public. Several passages were read into the inquiry's record, but Commissioner Oppel declined to publicize the entire manuscript. Transferred to penitentiary. During a court hearing on August 4, 2010, Judge Williams stated that Pickton should be committed to a federal penitentiary. Up to that point he had been held at a provincial pretrial institution. In June 2018 he was allegedly transferred from Kent Institution in British Columbia to the Port Cartier-1 in Quebec. Stay of final 20 murder charges. Pickton had faced a further 20 first-degree murder charges involving other female victims from Vancouver's downtown east side. On February 26, 2008, a family member of one of the 20 women named as alleged victims told the media that the Crown had told her a trial on the further 20 counts might not proceed. On August 4, 2010, Crown prosecutors stayed the pending murder charges against Pickton, ending the prospect of any further trials. The 20 charges were formally stayed by Crown Counsel Melissa Gillespie shortly after 4 p.m. during the British Columbia Supreme Court hearing at New Westminster. Most but not all of the publication bans in the case were lifted by the trial judge, James Williams of the British Columbia Supreme Court, after lawyers spent hours in court going through the various complicated bans. On August 6, 2010, various media outlets released a transcript of conversations between an RCMP undercover operator and Pickton in his holding cell. While the RCMP censored the undercover officer's name throughout most of the document, his name was left uncensored in several portions of the document that the RCMP released to the public. This uncensored version was available to the public through Global News, CTV News, and the Vancouver Sun for about an hour before being pulled and re-edited. It is not known the extent of the damage this mistake caused the undercover officer. Victims. On December 9, 2007, Pickton was convicted of second-degree murder in the deaths of 6 women. Count 1. Sirenil Botsway, born August 20, 1971, age 29 when she disappeared in August 2001. Her foster mother reported her missing on August 22, 2001. Count 2. Mona Lee Wilson, born January 13, 1975, age 26 when she went to her doctor on November 30, 2001, and was reported missing that night. Count 6. Andrea Josberry, age 22 when last seen in June 2001 and was reported missing June 8, 2001. Count 7. Brenda Ann Wolfe, age 32 when last seen in February 1999 and was reported missing on April 25, 2000. Count 16. Marnie Lee Frey, last seen August 1997 and reported missing on December 29, 1997. Vancouver Police Missing Persons Case Number 98-209,922. Count 11. Georgina Faith Papin, last seen in January 1999 and reported missing in March 2001. More victims. Pickton also stood accused of first-degree murder in the deaths of 20 other women until these charges were stayed on August 4, 2010. Count 3. Jacqueline Michelle McDonnell, 23 when she was last seen in January 1999. Vancouver Police Missing Persons Case Number 99039699. Count 4. Diane Rosemary Rock, born September 2, 1967, 34 when last seen on October 19, 2001. Reported missing December 13, 2001. Count 5. Heather Kathleen Bottomley, born August 17, 1973, 27 when she was last seen and reported missing on April 17, 2001. Count 8. Jennifer Lynn Firminger, last seen in 1999. Count 9. Helen May Hallmark, last seen August 1997. Vancouver Police Missing Persons Case Number 98-226,384. Count 10. Patricia Rose Johnson, last seen in March 2001. Count 12. Heather Chenrook, 30 when last seen in April 2001. Count 13. Tanya Hollick, 23 when last seen in October 1996. Count 14. Sherry Irving, 24 when last seen in 1997. Count 15. Inga Monique Hall, 46 when last seen in February 1998. Vancouver Police Missing Persons Case Number 98047919. Count 17. Tiffany Drew, last seen December 1999. Count 18. Sarah DeVries, last seen April 1998. Count 19. Cynthia Felix, last seen in December 1997. Count 20. Angela Rebecca Jardine, last seen November 20, 1998 between 3:30, 4 p.m. at Oppenheimer Park at a rally in the downtown east side of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Vancouver Police Missing Persons Case Number 98.286.097. Count 21, Diana Melnick, last seen in December 1995. Count 22, Jane Doe, charge lifted. See below. Count 23, Deborah Lynn Jones, last seen in December 2000. Count 24, Wendy Crawford, last seen in December 1999. Count 25, Carrie Koski, last seen in January 1998. Count 26, Andrea Faberhaven, last seen in March 1997. Vancouver Police Missing Persons Case Number 99.105703. Count 27, Carl Louise Ellis aka Nikki Trimble, born April 13, 1971, 25 when last seen in 1996. Reported missing October 2002. As of March 2, 2006, the murder charge involving the unidentified victim has been lifted. Pickton refused to enter a plea on the charge involving this victim, known in the proceedings as Jane Doe, so the court registered a not guilty plea on his behalf. The count as drawn fails to meet the minimal requirement set out in Section 581 of the Criminal Code. Accordingly, it must be quashed, wrote Justice James Williams. The detailed reasons for the judge's ruling cannot be reported in Canada because of the publication ban covering this stage of the trial. Pickton is implicated in the murders of the following women, but charges have not yet been laid. Incomplete list. Marianne Clark aka Nancy Greek, 25, disappeared in August 1991 from downtown Victoria. Yvonne Marie Bone, sometimes used the surname England, born November 30, 1967, 33 when last seen on March 16, 2001 and reported missing on March 21, 2001. Dawn Teresa Gray, reported missing in December 2000. Gray is the main subject of a 2006 documentary film about murdered and missing Aboriginal women in Canada, entitled Finding Dawn. Two unidentified women. After Pickton was arrested, many people started coming forward and talking to police about what was going on at the farm. One of these witnesses that came forward was Lynn Ellingson. Ellingson claimed to have seen Pickton skinning a woman hanging from a meat hook years earlier. She did not tell anyone about this out of fear for her life. Additionally, Ellingson admitted that she blackmailed Pickton about the incident on more than one occasion. The victim's children filed a civil lawsuit in May 2013 against the Vancouver Police Department, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Crown for failing to protect the victims. They reached a settlement in March 2014, where each of the children was to be compensated $50,000, without an admission of liability. August 2006, Pickton letters. In August 2006, Thomas Laudame, a 27-year-old Fremont, California resident, claimed that he had received 3 letters from Robert Pickton in response to letters Laudame sent under an assumed identity. In the letters, Pickton allegedly speaks with concern about the expense of the investigation, asserts his innocence, quotes and refers to the Bible, praises the trial judge, and responds in detail to fictional information in Laudame's letters, which were written in the guise of Maya Barnett, a down-on-her-luck woman. The news of the letter's existence was broken by the Vancouver Sun in an exclusive published on Saturday, September 2, 2006, and as of that date, neither law enforcement nor any representative of Pickton has verified the authenticity of the letters. The Sun, however, has undertaken several actions to confirm the document's authenticity, including confirming that the outgoing stamps are consistent with those of the North Fraser Pretrial Center, NFPC, where Pickton is being held, confirming through a representative of Canada Post that the outgoing stamps are not forgeries, and confirming that the machine, identifiable with a serial number included in the stamp used to stamp the envelopes, is the machine used by the NFPC. Laudame claimed not to have kept copies of his outgoing letters to Pickton. and as of September 4, 2006, no information on their existence has been forthcoming from Pickton or his representatives. Loud Amy had a history of writing to accused and convicted criminals, in some instances under his own identity, as with his correspondence with Clifford Olson, and in others in the guise of a character he believes will be more readily accepted by the targets of the letters. Loud Amy, an aspiring journalist, claimed that his motivation in releasing the letters was to help the public gain insights into Pickton. 2016 film. In 2015, a film with the working title of Full Flood began production in Vancouver by CBC TV. Based on Stevie Cameron's book On the Farm, it was to use the life experiences of Pickton's victims for a fictional story about women in the downtown East Side who became victims of a serial killer. Pickton was portrayed by Ben Cotton in the film. In 2016, the film was released under the title Unclaimed, or On the Farm in certain markets. 2016 autobiography. In 2016, a book claimed to have been written by Pickton and titled Pickton, in his own words, went up for sale and initiated controversy, critical petitions and actions by government to prevent Pickton from profiting from the work. Pickton was described as getting his manuscript out of prison by passing it to a former cellmate who then sent it to a retired construction worker from California named Michael Childress, who typed it up and is credited as the author of the 144-page book. Provincial Solicitor General Mike Morris and an online petition on Change.org each sought to remove the book from sale on Amazon.com. Premier Christy Clark expressed interest in introducing new legislation similar to laws in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Nova Scotia and Ontario to prevent criminal profits from such books. Colorado publisher Outskirts Press ceased publication of the book and asked Amazon to remove it from their site after finding out that although Childress had his name on the book cover, the author was actually an incarcerated criminal. See also List of serial killers by country. Gilbert Paul Jordan, the 2005 film Killer Pickton. References. Further reading. Stevie Cameron, the 30th of May 2007. The Pickton File. Random House Digital, Incorporated. ISBN 978-0-676-97953-4. Stevie Cameron, the 25th of October 2011. On the Farm. Robert William Pickton and the Tragic Story of Vancouver's Missing Women. Random House Digital, Incorporated. ISBN 978-0-676-97585-7. External links. Missing Women Commission of Inquiry, Apple Report, November 19, 2012. R. V. Pickton. Full text of Supreme Court of Canada decision available at LexUM and CanLII, July 30, 2010. R. V. Pickton. Decision of the Court of Appeal for British Columbia, June 25, 2009. Defense Appeal. R. V. Pickton. Decision of the Court of Appeal for British Columbia, June 25, 2009. Crown Appeal. R. V. Pickton. Decision of the Supreme Court of British Columbia, December 13, 2007. Ruling re-instructing the jury. R. V. Pickton. Decision of the Supreme Court of British Columbia, January 16, 2007. Ruling immediate application to access and publish Exhibits No. 1. Robert William Pickton Trial Information, Court Services, Ministry of Attorney General. Covering the trial. Former sex trade workers work as citizen correspondents for Arado. CBC Backgrounder. True TV article on Robert Pickton. Vancouver East Side Missing Women. BBC article on Pickton, January 21, 2007. Excerpts from The Pickton Letters. Pat Casanova Testimony, June 4-6, 2007. History of Sex Work in Vancouver. Downloadable PDF book written by sex workers. PDFs of the Pickton Letters obtained by the Vancouver Sun. Interviews and oral histories with victims' families and community workers. Part of research stored at Simon Fraser University Library.